the AI Kubernetes Show.
Hello, and welcome to the AI Kubernetes Show. My name is William Chia. I'll be your host. We are here live from the show floor at KubeCon in Atlanta, where we are talking about how all of the shifts that AI is bringing to our world are changing the art and science of platform engineering. Today, I'm very excited to have with us our guest, Ramiro Berrelleza, who is the CEO of Okteto. Ramiro, welcome to the show.
Actually excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very excited to be chatting about AI. This is a topic that a lot of people can have fatigue with. I'm curious, what have you been thinking about in terms of this realm? Is it something you've been thinking about for a long time? Or is it something that is maybe come newer to you? What's been top of mind for you?
Yeah, so I live in San Francisco. So as you can imagine, that is kind of like the AI town right now of the world. So it's something been on my mind for a while. However, lately I've seen this as more and more companies are asking the question of how are we going to benefit from AI? How can our developers benefit from AI? Is becoming more of a top of mind topic for me. Like today, yesterday, I would say that probably 50 to 60% of the conversations I've had with peers, customers, friends at KubeCon are about AI. Actually, just before coming here, I was chatting with my friend Victor Farsik about the impact of AI on developers and what the future is going to look like. So it's definitely a topic that can't be avoided, but also one that I'm particularly excited to explore, learn, and discover more of together.
Well, let's poke in there a little bit in terms of how AI is impacting developers, and in particular, like their productivity, what's being produced, and how it impacts the way they work day to day. What are you seeing, and what are you hearing from your customers, community, and the folks that you talk to?
Yeah, so the first thing that is probably the most fascinating to me is that pretty much 100% of our customers are already adopting AI. And what I find interesting about this is that we have a customer base that spans everything from, early stage startups, which is the obvious adopter of AI, all the way to Fortune 500, government, education institutions. It's really fascinating how everybody really jumped into it. Not everybody, of course, is at the same level of adoption, but you see things like Cursor, Copilot, Cloud Code, ChatGPT. Now I think of them as universal tools that all of these developers are now thinking, not should I use these tools, but how do I use these tools to get better at what I do, which is where, to me, dev experience, dev productivity, and AI need to do a lot together to help figure this out.
We've shifted to a different place where it's no longer a question of if we were there, but it's how are you doing it? So this is 100% adoption. Everybody's doing something, some people more than less. And it's just a question of how are you doing it? Certainly a key topic for many folks are code generation tools, something that is talked about often, but I will just ask for yourself or for your organization, what's your favorite code generation tool, and how did you end up picking that one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have a favorite one because I've been almost without really trying, and everybody in our company kind of does the same thing, shifting from 1 month we're using Copilot, the next month we're trying Cloud Code. Then now lately we've been moving more towards more of agentic development. We use our own solution, but also Cloud Code, Codex. One thing I've learned from my team, and we have one of our PMs is really good at being on top of AI, is how important it has been to experiment. Like you can't it's too early to pick one tool and say, this is it. I'm going to, like the same way that maybe you're picking one programming language and you're like, this is my language, or this is my cloud. I'm going to be an expert on GCP or AWS. It's super early. Like there's so many cool things coming off that as a developer, they need to try a lot of different things. And that's kind of what we do.
I like this analogy a lot. I know when I was learning to first write software, I started with JavaScript. That was what was accessible to me. Some folks start with Python, but very, very quickly, I mean, Bash, PHP, I had 5 or 6 languages within my first maybe month or two of digging in. So I really like this analogy of think back to when you first started to learn software development. Did you just pick one language and you only did that? No, in this AI tooling space of this Cambrian explosion of tooling, people are switching and trying things out and the winners aren't completely settled. I'm curious, one of the things that you have said is that for you that it is obvious that the future of software development isn't about using 1 or 2 agents, it's about building with fleets of them. I thought this was very interesting, and I am curious, what was the problem that you were experiencing or that you saw that caused this to really come into sharp contrast for you?
Yeah. Early on, we're thinking about this idea. I don't know if you remember, there's this very famous XKCD screen cap of like, hey, like these developers are playing around. If you haven't seen it, it's very iconic of like the manager shouting at them, why are you wasting time? And they're like, no, our software is compiling. And they're like, okay, keep going, compiling. Right? So when we were starting to use this vibe coding tools, you kind of saw the same, right? Like you're writing some code or you ask a question, and it takes a while to get an answer. And as we were talking about this intently, we're like, hey, why are we waiting? If I have a question, if I can work on one thing, what if I could work on 1, 2, 3, 5 things? And as we talk to our customers, to our community, we kind of kept seeing people having the same challenge of like, hey, this is very slow because I ask a question and I have to wait. And then at the same time, I met some people that was working our source graph and they were seeing the same thing. And that's when we started to talk about fleets, about what if we just, the same way that a manager has, a team and they can work on different streams of work, what if we could do the same thing with agents and have the agents running somewhere, async, give them a task, and then you become more of the manager of the fleet. And that's why we went with the word fleet, because we see that as like eventually tens, maybe hundreds of agents. Because to me, it's very obvious that if one agent is good, it's helpful. How about we have a lot of them, especially doing different tasks? You can have them writing code, executing tests, searching for vulnerabilities, writing your PR descriptions. Like as you move to this world of remote agents, you're no longer constrained by what one is doing. And that to me is one of the biggest multipliers we're going to see, I think, in the next probably 2 to 5 years.
I already love this set of analogies, just harkening back to software development itself, where, which tools you pick, it's like picking your favorite programming language. You eventually get there, but at first you got to try a lot out. And why agentic development versus, having one tool or one thread. And it's like when you had to wait for your code to compile. I like this analogy a lot. So I think that anybody watching the show, whether a software developer or not, they have experienced using a single threaded chat interface for, Gemini, ChatGPT, and you ask the question and you wait. And we know that there's a trade-off between the faster the model, the, less helpful it often is, and the deeper the model, the more time it can take. So if you can fire off your queries to an agent and let it chug for as long as it needs to, and return to you asynchronously, that sounds like a very powerful mechanism. Is there a specific workflow? And if there's not one that comes to mind, but I'm curious, again, either you or your team or someone, customer, community member, that they were trying to do this and trying to do it single-threaded was taking some amount of time, but by enabling like a set or fleet of agents, it reduced that time. Is there a story that comes to mind?
Yeah, there is one. So we're building this feature. A startup, want to be close to our customers. So we engage with a few of our customers. And there's this one company, medium-sized startup. We're one of our first kind of like beta adopters. And when we launched the beta of the Okteto AI, we gave them we set up some free credits we got from Anthropic. Say, hey, here's a gift card with like $500. Try this out. Don't worry. Don't set up your own account, whatever, no? And this one company, it's like I think our third or fourth evaluator, they come back the next day, 24 hours. Hey, we run out of credits. Can we get more? And we're like, what happened? Do we have a bug? And then our PM went to see our data. This company launched 150 agents, one person in the span of 24 hours. And they just went through their backlog and picked like 20, 30 things, throw them into the agents, and then just got like a bunch of PRs in less than 24 hours. And to me, that was a fascinating insight into like, as you adopt this, and they're outliers, no? They really lean into this more than other customers we have. But to me, that's kind of like the promise of the future. This is where you really see teams going all in, removing the first kind of bottleneck, which is humans typing code, and instead say, hey, we have all these tickets, they have a good description, they are explaining what we need to be done. What if we just put that on all these agents that can work 24 hours a day? And they got this very clear result, even after 24 hours, of like, wow, this is really making this part of our workflow much faster. And our agents they generate code, they run tests, they create PRs, they have their own sandboxes. So they were able to get like this end-to-end experience very quickly, which was fascinating. Not everybody can adopt at this speed, but for me it was like, wow, kind of a bit of a window into what I think the normal dev workflow is going to be in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely fascinating when new technologies, or even just as software engineers or product companies, we ship a new feature, we believe the user will use it one way, and they use it in ways completely surprise us. And the way I almost think about this is, I imagine in the early days of television, folks would take like a stage play and just try to record it. And it didn't work. Their mind wasn't thinking about, you can have multiple camera angles. You can do all kinds of things that you couldn't do on stage. So this use case of, hey, well, we give you some agents, just go through your backlog like you normally would. And we think, maybe they'll use 2 or 3 agents, it'll speed them up. But this person got the idea, no, I could use 150. I could do everything in one day. That's not possible without this technology. But this was surprising, the scale and the pace of it.
Yeah.
So as organizations are seeing a massive increase in, at a minimum, load, that I think everyone agrees with, there's more load. People have differing experiences on whether that's increased productivity. Mm-hmm. But how do you think organizations, engineering teams, and platform engineering in particular, need to adapt to this increased load that AI is bringing to our world?
That is a super interesting question. And to me, is one of the main drivers of why a lot of organizations are now having regret about their AI adoption, investments, projects, no? If you're measuring productivity by lines of code or number of PRs, you're measuring the wrong thing. And we know this, no? Like, our industry has, for a very long time, we've been saying lines of code is not a measure of anything. The same thing applies to AI. So the first thing that organizations need to realize is that number of PRs open per day on its own is not a good metric. Because what happens in a lot of these organizations is they have agents. Now their agents are producing 10x the PRs that they were doing before. And what this means is that now the developers are spending a lot of time reviewing code, waiting for CI workloads to run, or dealing with code they don't understand that is running on production, that they have to like then patch or adopt. So that's something very important to understand. As organizations adapt to this, is we identify, like any other process, no? What are you trying to optimize for? Where are your bottlenecks? Because if your bottleneck is not on, let's say, backlog analysis, but it's on like CI workflows, then maybe you should be spending your AI budget on optimizing that aspect. Like, for example, there's a lot of companies now doing inspection of logs to figure out, hey, when a test fails, why? That to me is key. It's understanding where the bottleneck is. And as you said, not like we went with TV. For me, a good metaphor of this is mobile. One of the first mobile phones I had was a Windows phone.
Okay.
The Windows phone had a start button on the phone because we were just taking the computer to the phone. Now we have an iPhone, and now we have all these modern phones. We have to go through that as well. So at the same time, I think companies need to be patient of understanding this new technology. To me, always the phase one of the adoption is the lift and shift. what you were referring to, which is we take what we were doing today, just put it on AI. But I think now is the time to start thinking of what phase 2 looks like, which is how do we build AI native workflows that help our organization without creating more bottlenecks than before? Because I've spoken to, yesterday I was chatting with a friend, he's a maintainer of the Kairos project, and he was complaining about how much more work he has now as a maintainer because a lot of PRs are just done by agents and it's not making their project healthier because they have so much more work. But they are leveraging other aspects of this, like testing, like scans for security, and all these other things. So very important to find, my opinion, the bottleneck on your organization and really focus on that rather than just, like adopt the first thing you find.
A lot of good stuff in there. I think the analogy could be for those of us in the cloud native space, the lift and shift, as you mentioned. So you have your VM application and you just shove the entire application in the container. Now it's containerized, right? Well, not quite. This is like taking the old thing and trying to put it in the new thing, but that's not a bad place to start. And then you can decompose that, break it into services, do truly cloud native technology that we've been doing for the last decade. Now it's thinking about these AI native workflows. And this is interesting that you bring up the idea of not measuring number of PRs. So I was in an organization once where they did actually say, we want to measure the number of PRs. What worked out kind of nice about this was folks will always try to game the system, right? So as a developer, what do you do when you're incentivized to do more PRs? You make them smaller and smaller, right? So you can ship more of them. And those are smaller PRs are easier to review. So it ended up being a powerful tool. But now in this era where a fleet of agents can empty, your backlog in a day and create PRs galore, we run into this maintainer overload, especially as here we are at KubeCon, we talk about open source. The load on developers, on organizations in general is high, but the load on maintainers in particular of open source projects, now this load is increasing. What do you think maintainers need to do or think about in the era of AI to adjust for folks submitting, 100x of PRs?
Yeah, I've been having a lot of conversations. I'm an open source guy at heart, so I participate in a lot of projects. We have an open source project as well in Okteto. This is every maintainer is talking about this because it's real. No, like last year was all about how do I fight spam PRs? PRs just sent because people wanted to get the numbers up, get the number of PRs, gain the prestige. Now it's more about like how do we leverage this tool? Because you said early on our conversation, AI is here to stay. You can't fight AI. You can't be like, I'm not going to accept AI enhanced PRs in my project. That is unrealistic. No, it's like saying, I'm only going to take PRs that are on this particular OS, on this particular language. Like, it doesn't work anymore. So I think setting up clear policies for your community is very important on what are you willing to accept and what is your posture on AI. Because, for example, Michi Hashimoto from Terraform fame has been very vocal about this on Twitter, about how in the project Ghosty, which is a fantastic terminal, he kind of said, yes, of course you can send AI enhanced PRs, but my ask is you need to understand the code. It needs to be human proof. You cannot send something just from cursor, push to PR, which I think is a sensible approach. I think, for example, leveraging also, I was talking about this earlier today, using agents to understand the code is a very powerful tool where you ask the agent, hey, here's this branch. Can you tell me the intent of this branch is one?
Is there an example that comes to mind of either code base you were looking at or conversation you had where somebody was trying to understand a code base, doing it on their own would have taken a long time, but they used AI to help them understand the code base?
Yes, I do that all the time. So I'm the CEO of the company. So I'm no longer on a technical role where I'm no longer writing code every day. Sadly, it is one of my passions, but right now I'm in a different role. But right now we're building a very technically complex feature. And as a customer-facing person in my company, I need to explain to my customers how to use it, how to integrate this new feature, limitations, superpowers, no? So I use Cloud Code a lot. to just kind of like get the code base, get some of the big PRs, and I say, hey, Cloud Code, can you explain this to me? What's going on here? And it's fascinating how much I'm able to understand from there, which means that I don't have to go and bother my CTO and say, hey, can you explain this to me? Please sit down and show it to me, or our engineers, which, as you said, they're busy. So that to me it's a very powerful use case where someone who's technical, I am an engineer by trade, but who's no longer involved on the day-to-day is able to learn this. To the point that now internally we have a policy where all of our solution engineers have access to these kind of tools so they can understand features, limitations, test coverage, without having to go and look for documentation or ask the developers. Like our new policy is like first ask Claude or whatever agent of your choice you have, and then go for the developers. And we're a small team, we're lean, and this is allowing us to do a lot more than before, which is a very interesting use case for this that I think maintainers can benefit from.
Yeah, I love this line of thought and the stories that you're sharing, in the sense that the use cases that get the most headlines are about code generation or about software developers and using code gen tools in their IDE and a few ancillary use cases. But when you think about somebody with an engineering background, but now is in a CEO role, or when you think about somebody who is technical, but in like a technical pre-sales or technical post-sales solution architect, and in an old world, their only option was some type of human interface. But now I imagine when you go to have a conversation with your CTO as leaders of your organization, instead of him having to drive all the context, you can now use AI to understand the new code base, understand the new features, and you're showing up to that conversation with that context as a starting point. That, I imagine, that changes the dialogue between you and your CTO.
It changes the dialogue across the entire organization because, in organizations, internal communication is a big problem. And this applies to companies, communities, like open source projects. One of the biggest challenges maintainers have is that when you try to onboard someone new to your project, they haven't been around for a long time. They don't have the context that maybe if imagine that you've been like maintaining Linkerd, like someone like for 5-6 years, and then you want to bring someone else new. How do you share 5 years of experience, of conversations, of docs? It's very hard. But if you can have an agent somehow summarize some of this into a doc that then new maintainers can ingest, or employees, as you said, it shifts the conversation from the basic to much higher level, and everybody benefits because in the case of our CTO and myself, I can ask more business level questions about, hey, what training is needed, which customers, what challenges. Maintainers can talk about, okay, we have this backlog. Now I get why we haven't done this kind of projects, why we're focused on this. I get the internal culture, all of those things. And I keep seeing more and more companies that now have an agent be part of the new employee onboarding for the same reason. Hey, just understand, how do we do things here? And get like a nice summary that is living, that is not like an outdated document. It's a very powerful tool. And as you said, they don't get the big headlines of like code gen and millions of lines of code per day. But I think, maybe it's a bit of a hot take, but I think it's way more important because at the end of the day, organizations are constrained by humans. And a big project like Kubernetes, like Linkerd or others are limited by that, not by the technical challenges. It's more about like who can review the code, who can make sure it's not a hack, like we were talking yesterday about adversarial PRs. How do you, it's not a problem in a company, but in a public open source project, you have to watch out. We've seen NPM receive adversarial PRs where somebody's trying to inject, a hack, a worm. That is another area where like AI can help a lot by explaining the code, by helping set up internal rules. It's just fascinating.
This really resonates with me as somebody who is, community manager and we run our open source community as well. And the heart for maintainers, the heart for open source developers who contribute to open source. And the idea is the number of projects are increasing, but the folks contributing are not increasing at the same rate. A lot of maintainer burnout, a lot of challenge. and then AI sends you way more PRs. But if you can use this type of understanding, how do I get a new person in my code base, that a new contributor up to speed quickly? This is a way that we can drive open source forward and give more folks an opportunity to be able to contribute to code bases where normally it would take many PRs or a lot of interaction and back and forth and a lot of time in that code to come up to that speed in that context. AI can expedite a lot of that for the new users in the community. That is really powerful. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really have loved all of the topics that we've been to touch. If folks want to connect with you, Okteto more, want to learn more about your agents, where can folks go to connect with you or to understand more about your story?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter, GitHub, the Kubernetes Slack. So you can find me personally, Berrelleza, almost everywhere. Okteto.com is the place to learn more about our products. We just launched, actually, we haven't made, it's not public, but we launched a free tier about a month ago. So if any of you want to try out our agents, you can just go to our website, get a free key to our products, and you can start to try this idea of agents that are able to generate code, deploy, test, and really give you this end-to-end experience. We have an active community. We have an open source project as well. So we're always looking for, as I was saying earlier, more people to help us maintain, discuss, test, get ideas. So always looking forward to chat with more people in the community and to continue to grow this cloud native community into this new world of AI.
Ramiro, thank you so much. It has been great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jay. It was a pleasure.